Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Women of AIDC Community Dialogue. We are so glad you could join us for this session featuring our guest speaker, Emily Jackson from RF Ideas, who will be presenting on career growth and confidence building. This is an important and timely topic, and we are excited to have you with us for what should be a thoughtful and inspiring discussion. Thank you for being here, and let's get started by going over a few housekeeping items. So first, you see the AIM antitrust policy. It's the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of those laws. Next is a quick reminder of AIM's collaboration and work product policy. AIM committee and community meetings are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative process. Thank you all for helping us maintain a productive and appropriate environment for discussion. Also, all attendees are muted for today's session. However, we absolutely encourage your participation. If you have questions during the presentation, please submit them at any time using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to address all questions and comments. Also, I want to note that a recording of today's session will be available in the coming days. Before we transition to today's presentation, I would also likely to briefly highlight the mission of the Women of AIDC Mastermind Group. AIM's mission with this collective is to empower, connect, and advance women in AIDC by fostering leadership, innovation, and inclusion. Through networking, education, and advocacy, we create opportunities for women to thrive and drive meaningful impact in technology, business, and global supply chains. Today's discussion is a great example of that mission in action, and we are excited to continue building this community together. I would now like to introduce our guest speaker. Emily Jackson is a sales leader, speaker, career transition coach, and author. Emily helps individuals discover their path and purpose through lived self-reflection. Her ability to reflect, pivot, and succeed is evident in her diverse career background across industries including fitness, higher education, aviation, collegiate sports, and the technology sector. Emily holds an MBA with an emphasis in entrepreneurship, a master's in sports and recreation administration, and a bachelor's of arts in organizational leadership. She has been recognized by influential women as one of today's most inspiring and accomplished professional women, and has also been featured on the cover of Women Thrive magazine. Emily has spoken at events including the Northern Kentucky University Business Summit, the Women Thrive Summit, the Rebirth Summit, and Women in Tech at Cincinnati State Technical College. We're excited to have her today to share her perspective on career growth and confidence building. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the introduction. Let me bop on over to my presentation and share that. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Well, yeah, thank you again for that introduction. It's wonderful to be part of this event. Thank you to AIM and Women of AIDC for having me. I was very excited to get the opportunity to be a part of this, so thank you again. So, yeah, I'm Emily Jackson. I'm a senior channel manager and inside sales manager at RF Ideas. I've been with RF Ideas for about 4.5 years and have been in the tech industry for about 6 years. So, as you know, that was mentioned in my introduction, I've been in a lot of different roles and a lot of different career paths. And it honestly is because it took me a while to figure out where I fit. And that's where this conversation starts, the switch up and step up to your true purpose, your best self, your dream career. And this is all my lived experience. And that's what's so great about this conversation is that it's not just me saying, oh, I think this would probably work because, I've seen other people do it, but this is what I experienced and what I've been undergoing over my career. So it's not just a personal story, though. It's highly actionable. Like what I'll talk about today, honestly, you're going to be like, really? I think I've thought about that before and probably you have, but you haven't dove deep into it and really interpersonally thought about these steps. So I'll be sharing 5 steps to switch up your mindset, and then we'll go into stepping up to that dream career, that continuous career growth. And so, what's also great about this is yes, it's actionable. You'll get those steps so you can kind of follow along with, take after this. But then also, it's relatable regardless of what stage that you're in your career. I mean, think about we're always wanting to improve, right? We're always wanting to grow, no matter if it's in personal life, professional life. We just, as people, want to get better at what we do. So, this is great for whatever stage you're at in your career because you're always looking to grow in some way. So, you can use these steps. And again, it's just so simple. You're going to have the 5 steps. You can follow along. I do encourage pen and paper if you want to take some notes. I'm sure we can share this presentation afterwards. And so you can have that to follow along. And of course, I love to connect with as many people as possible. So I'd love to connect with you further and talk more about this with you. So, I want to give you a little insight about who I am. Yes, I talked about what my role is and kind of a little bit about my background, but that's not really who I am, right? So I want to share that with you today so you can kind of see how we're kind of alike and how you maybe have some shared experiences with me. So, I grew up as someone who didn't feel like they really had a voice. And it's because I wasn't sure of myself. I wasn't sure how to take control of my life and let alone my career. And ultimately, it was because I lacked self-confidence. I really didn't have the confidence to know what my next steps would be, personal or professional life. And, I've met so many individuals that are just like that, that they're in a career for a while, but they don't really know themselves. Or maybe they just graduated and they're trying to figure out, gosh, what am I even good at? I'm not sure. Or maybe you're 8 years in an industry like I was thinking, oh, I don't think this is right for me after all. Where do I go from here? And I want to ask you a question to just kind of be thinking about throughout this presentation, just really get your wheels turning. Are you currently working towards your purpose? And do you even know what that purpose is, or do you know your purpose? And do you know the strengths that can guide you to that next career move, to your purpose? You know some strengths of yours, but are those going to guide you to where you're really meant to be? So in this career journey over the my career so far, and yeah, I've still got a ways to go. I've still got a lot to learn, and it's definitely still a journey I'm on. But through that, I've had a lot of dealings with self-confidence and self-awareness. And that's what this journey is really, really about. Great. It's next career moves, next steps, career growth. But really, what's more important is that self-confidence and that self-awareness piece. And so it was mentioned in the introduction that I graduated with a bachelor's in organizational leadership. So I'm going to take you to, right after college. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I've always loved working out. I've always been into fitness and health and wellness. And so I had worked at the recreation center during college. So I thought, okay, yeah, that seems like a good industry for me. I'm going to go into the fitness industry. And I ended up working at the recreation center where I graduated. And I was in that industry for 8 years, highs and lows while there and a couple different roles. Um, Not all bad for sure. And there was some forward progression, some personal progress there, some growth, but not to the level that I was really desiring and that now I know that I needed. And I really started to feel lost about 8 years in. So again, if you're somebody who's in a career path that you're like, oh, darn, I need to switch it up. I think I need something different. Sometimes it takes a while for us to realize that. And so 8 years in, I started to feel really lost. And unfortunately, that led to some really physical symptoms for me. I was having heart palpitations, I was having panic attacks, tunnel vision. And I mean, essentially, my body was saying, you've got to stop this. You need a change. You need something different. This is not what's going to be good for you long term. And so I took a step back and realized, okay, it's up to me to change this for myself, but I didn't know where to start. So I just started with simple self-reflection steps. So this self-reflection journey we'll talk about today. And each of those steps got me to know myself and then ultimately build confidence with that because when you know yourself and you have self-awareness, that's where you truly build self-confidence. And that's absolutely what I've found in my journey. And I also want to share a little insight too about where I'm coming from on the confidence level. It wasn't just that I was kind of lost, didn't know what I wanted to do career-wise. I had such low self-confidence, and I'm a very introverted person that I couldn't even do the most basic things myself and feel comfortable with it. And so I have a picture up here. Me as a ballerina, okay, I'm 5 or 6 years old, something like that there, I think 6. And very happy child, happy childhood. Although my mom might beg to differ, she might say that I was an angry child. Had a little bit of an attitude problem, but that's a different story. But anyway, very happy childhood. However, I've always been extremely introverted, extremely shy, and just very unsure of myself. If something that I just kind of naturally struggled with throughout childhood, young adulthood, and so on. And I'll give you some examples of how extreme this was. I'm talking in college. I could not order food on my own at a restaurant. I would be extremely just anxiety ridden to order food. I could not stand in lunch lines. The thought of a cafeteria individual asking me a question, just like, oh my gosh, I won't know how to answer that. I can't do that. And so couldn't even be in a lunch line. Let's not even go into the bursar office if I had any issues there. My poor twin sister, she had to guide me through that, and she had to be there to talk for me. Even the first several weeks of school for each semester, um, my sister had to guide me to my classroom the first couple of weeks so that I could make sure that I knew exactly where it was because I was so anxious that I was going to be lost. I was going to walk into the wrong room. I mean, I was going through all these scenarios constantly of things that I couldn't do, I wasn't capable of myself. And so that just gives you some insight into how how low my confidence was. And I wish I could say that was just as a child and a young adult, but that continued throughout my beginnings of my professional career. Maybe not to that extreme, but I still very much struggled with feeling like I couldn't do much on my own and I just wasn't confident. And so then you see my picture here. This is a pretty recent picture of me. And that woman right there is a confident woman, and the woman speaking with you today is a confident woman. Now, does that mean that I am always confident about every single thing I do and every decision I make? Absolutely not. But overall, I know who I am. I know what I'm working towards and what is valuable to me. And because of that, I feel confident in what I'm doing in life, what I'm doing in my career. And that is all because of this self-reflection journey. So, as I mentioned, it's a I don't know, I want to say quick and easy, but I wouldn't say quick and easy. It's simple stuff, but it's going to keep you or get you going in your mindset shift. So, switching up your mindset are these first 5 steps. So, steps 1 through 5, we're switching up our mindset. We're diving in a little bit deeper to our interpersonal thoughts, likes, awareness, and so on. So, the first step is to determine your interests. And what are your likes and dislikes? And you may be thinking, oh my gosh, Emily, that is the simplest question ever. And yeah, it totally is. It is a very simple question. When you think about your likes and dislikes, and you probably have many times, right? Your likes and dislikes, you're probably even talking at a dinner party, at just kind of a networking event. You're probably talking about things like, oh, I like the Bengals. I dislike the Patriots or what have you. I don't dislike the Patriots. I'm just making that up. But anyway, you probably talk about your likes and dislikes a lot. However, I'm asking you to dive deeper into that. And I'm, of course, with this conversation, we're thinking about it in the vein of your career. So when you think about your likes and dislikes, think about your career path, particular roles, particular organizations that you've been a part of or that you're currently a part of. And I encourage you to make a list of those likes and dislikes. And now I'm a big proponent of writing things down. So would definitely encourage that. But if you're not someone who loves to take notes, then you don't have to write it down. But I would create that list and then ask the why. So you're not just simply saying, "Oh, I like teaching in my job," or "I like this particular aspect of my job," and oh, that's it. Okay, those are the things I like. No, you're asking the why because when you ask the why, that's going to determine or help you determine what your next career path, the next career move can be. So I'll give you an example from my life. So when I was in the fitness industry, I was leading like groups of student staff in the workout area, essentially, or the fitness area. And what I really enjoyed about that is the trainings. So we would have a monthly training where I'd train them on all kinds of different things, whether it's like how to clean equipment properly, first aid stuff, or what have you. And I really enjoyed compiling those trainings, giving those trainings, and then speaking with them, getting their insights on what they felt really good about, what they wanted to improve on, and so on. And what that tells me when I think about, okay, I like training. That tells me I like teaching. Okay, great. I like teaching. What does that tell me? Does that tell me that I need to be a teacher? And that's like, I need to just change that to that career path? Well, it could, but not necessarily. But what it does tell me is that I enjoy professional development. I love seeing individuals that I'm working with progress to their next level. I am a servant leader because I like to help others get to that next step. And it also tells me that I like mentorship. I like to mentor other individuals. And so, all three of those things, when I'm thinking, and that's just one example of one thing that I liked about my previous role, all of those, that one thing tells me all of that about myself. So now I know, okay, the next organization that I go into, that next career path for me needs to incorporate those things. I know that I want those things in my career path because I find those personally satisfying. So again, simple question, but you dive deeper and you find out so much about yourself. And I want to ask you guys, which I don't know if I can see it in, where is the chat from where I'm at? Can I see the chat? I was going to ask you guys to kind of put in the chat. Maybe if people start putting stuff in the chat, I'll see something, but let me let me see. I wanted to ask you if you would, kind of share some of your likes and dislikes from your current or previous roles. So just if you can kind of add those into the chat, that would be wonderful. And again, I don't know if I can see. I'm looking for where the chat. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. It popped up. Okay.
The chat is disabled, but you can do that in the Q&A if you would like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, we'll do that at the end. All right. So getting into, you've kind of thought about your likes and dislikes, and now you're thinking about the next step. So step two. So that's learn your values. So when you're thinking about values, I really enjoy talking about values because it's something that we all have absolutely thought about before, and we've all probably assessed what our values are or been asked that question, like even in an interview process, right? You're probably asked about, what are your professional values as a leader and things like that. And so we've thought about it, right? But let's think about it a little bit deeper and in the vein of those next steps in our career and career growth. So what I would ask here is that you ask yourself two questions. What gives you great joy? And then what do you dread? So when you think about what gives you great joy, that's going to instantly tell you that that's a value of yours. And then, of course, on the opposite spectrum, if something gives you dread something, the opposite of that is going to be a value of yours. So if you don't know for sure right now what your values are, those are a way that you can find those out. And so I'll give you an example for myself. So some joys in life is I really love a community environment. I like to feel like I'm a part of a team. I like a family environment. I like positivity. And this is in any aspect of my life. I like those things. I value those things. So my values, I mean, if I could pick out a core one there, it would be community. So I value community in the workplace, in the organization that I'm a part of, in the role that I'm a part of. Things that I dread, I would dread feeling siloed. I dread negativity and gossip, and I also dread a highly competitive environment. So that should tell me, okay, I want to avoid those things in a workplace, in a role. Okay, so if I'm looking for that next step and it looks like it's a highly competitive environment, I know, you know what? Everything else sounds good about it, but I'm seeing that it's highly competitive. That's not a value of mine. That's not something where I feel that I thrive. So that tells me where I need to go. And now, something I would really say to remember, if you don't remember anything from this presentation, is your consistency across work and home in your values. And I always like to mention this because I think, at least for me, I kind of grew up thinking that you had to be Emily at home or work Emily and home Emily. So two different Emilys because we couldn't have professional values and personal values mix. But I'm telling you that in my experience, you need to just have values. They're the same across the board. Okay, so whatever values that you have or that are what you would consider personal values, you can still lead with those values in the workplace as a leader, in your professional role, in your organization. And if an organization, if a role, if a career path doesn't meet those personal values, then you might be satisfied for a little bit, but you're not going to be satisfied long term with where you are and where that career trajectory is going for you. Because think about how hard that is to essentially be two different people. Oh, Emily at home and Emily at work. Oh, I mean, I've got enough going on. I don't need to siphon myself out to two different versions of myself, right? And ultimately, if you are doing that, you're just not your whole self at work or at home. And that's just devastating, right? That's really hard to do. And it's just more stress on us. So, what I would suggest is just making sure that whatever values you have, even if you consider them to be more personal values, that you are guiding and leading with those even in the workplace. All right, step 3. So, okay, you guys, I hope you're not rolling your eyes yet, but transferable skills. Okay. Now, this sounds like we're talking about building your resume, which guess what? We are going to talk about resumes. But transferable skills is such a valuable thing. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about really intricate details about transferable skills. But what I want to make a point of is sharing how understanding my transferable skills and how you can understand your transferable skills, how that brings such immense value to your decision making for your career path, for that next career goal, and that next move for you. So, the reason I say that is in my experience, I was working in that fitness industry, right? I told you I was 8 years in. I was going through this self-reflection journey, figuring out, okay, where do I go next? And one of the key components to figuring out where I went next was honing in on what my transferable skills are. And then kind of thinking outside the box with those. So some of these typical ones you see here are, collaboration, time management, problem solving. Okay, great. But what I did to then get to my next career role in the aviation industry. So I was looking at a role at GE Aerospace for an operations specialist. And I was able to get an interview for that role. And seemingly, so here I am going from fitness. That's why you see the kettlebell to the airplane there. Fitness to aviation. Seemingly, those roles may not have anything to do with each other, you may think. But what I did is I created a transferable skills document that showed the transferable skills I had from my fitness role that could really directly relate to that new role, that operations role, by just looking at the job description and just deciphering, okay, I have some project management experience and this is the value I brought with that project management that can be directed towards this operations role and so on. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the details there, but that's how I then printed out that transferable skills document. I brought it to the interview process and I was able to talk through, yes, of course, my resume, but also that document to show I'm not just a decent fit here, like personality wise, but I've actually had experience that relates to and can bring value to this role that you've posted and that I'm interviewing for. It may seem like I'm not a direct shoe in for this, but I do have the transferable skills to get it. And so, transferable skills are something we've all thought about at some time, but I encourage you, whatever stage you're in your career, you want to constantly be thinking about these new transferable skills that you're picking up throughout each role that you have, because each role has new transferable skills, right? That you're building this out over your career. And so that helps you to be a master of pivoting to a new career, a new role, that management position you've been looking to go to, what have you. So, transferable skills are very important for you to think about when you're looking for, hey, where do I go next in my career? Next thing I'll talk about just within the transferable skills is also strengths. So I compile these into one step here just because I think they go along really well together. And the main thing I'll talk about strengths here, we all kind of have an idea of what our strengths are, right? I could spout out off, my top three that I think are my strengths, and that's wonderful. I'm sure you're all able to do that. But what's really important with strengths is that you phone a friend. You get that mentor perspective, you get that network perspective, that outside viewpoint of what your strengths are. And the reason I say this is because I've had the experience, and this is the example I'll give you is just one of many, but when I was in the fitness industry and I had a mentor at that time that I was talking to about my concern. I think I was just a couple years in at that time. And, again, I told you I'm an introvert, pretty quiet most of the time. And had concern and shared with them, hey, at these professional staff meetings, I know I'm not talking a lot and I'm not really speaking up a lot. And I'm worried that my colleagues think that I'm uninterested, that I maybe don't know what I'm talking about, and that I just am maybe not meant for this type of role. And I shared that concern with them, and they said, you know what, Emily, that's not what we think. We actually know because you're someone who doesn't just talk to hear themselves talk. So when you do speak up at the meetings, we know that it's something really important and we really listen. And so here I was coming into this conversation thinking, quiet introvert, that's a weakness. But my mentor told me, quiet introvert, that can actually be a strength for you. And I never thought of it like that before. And I never would have if I didn't have that conversation and get that feedback from her. And then moving forward, I thought to myself, okay, I don't have to be the loudest one in the room in order to be a leader, in order to be seen as someone who knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about. That me being a quieter person is not a weakness of mine. It can be a strength. So that's just one example of many that I could probably give you, that you want to get that outside perspective. And then if you're a leader, you want to make sure that you're giving those that you mentor, those that you have in your network, you want to make sure you're giving them the outside perspective as well, because that's just going to build out their toolbox of strengths. So make sure that you're doing that as a leader. All right. Step 4. Okay, I told you we were going to talk about resumes. I warned you. So we are going to talk a little bit about resumes, but what I want to do here is think about resumes a little bit more outside of the box. So I'm not going to talk about like it needs to have this, 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 but we're going to talk about how to create your really well thought out, great resume that you continue to update and make great so that when you decide, okay, I've been in this role for a few years, I'm ready to take that next step, that you don't have to think back and oh, let's see, what did I do 3 years ago that was really good? What were some of the accomplishments so that you don't have to do that, that you already have it just kind of ready to go, or at least close to that. So the first thing I'll say about resumes is that you want to create a wins folder. And now I want to be clear here. I cannot take credit for this great advice. This was from a colleague of mine who's part of our women's ERG within our company, and she had been doing this for years. And a couple years ago, she mentioned this to us as some advice she gave us, and I've been doing it ever since, and it's been amazing for me. If you're anything like me, I have a terrible memory. I can't remember hardly anything, let alone my wins and things that happen within my role. So Create a wins folder, meaning anytime you have a success at work, so maybe you closed a quota, maybe you met 110% of your sales quota, maybe you'd led a great customer presentation, or you onboarded this new process, or what have you. Whenever you have those wins, create either a physical folder, a folder in your email, or on your desktop that you can always refer back to, not just for your resume, but let's say you're having a terrible day. Maybe you did a terrible presentation or you felt like it didn't go well. You can always look back when you start to have those thoughts of, oh, I'm just not good at presentations. Well, that's not true because look in your wins folder. You just had an amazing presentation a couple months ago and you recorded that or you made a note of that. So that's a great confidence builder as well. The next thing I'll say is the storytelling resume. So that's really a big key point of having a great resume is making sure that it's a storytelling one. And honestly, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, steps 1 through 3, can be a big part, a big piece of that storytelling resume. And what I mean by that is that you're not just describing, oh, this is what I did in this role. You're describing the impact that you had. So remember when I was talking about transferable skills and I talked about how that document showed the impact that I had and how it related or could relate to the impact I would have on the new role. Same thing goes with your storytelling resume. You want to be able to show the impact that you've had, not just, oh, I completed these tasks that I was required to do in this role. So I'll give you an example. If you had just a standard resume that said something along the lines of, I managed 20 employees with training and oversight. Okay, that doesn't tell us a whole lot, right? And then what if you had a storytelling resume, though, that said something along the lines of achieve staff retention rate of 90% by implementing employee-friendly policies and collaborative work culture. Okay, if I'm an interviewer, I'm going to want to know a little bit more about that. How did you create that collaborative work culture? What about that employee-friendly policies and environment? How did you captivate that? And so that as an interviewer, as your resume, whoever's reviewing your resume, that gives them more insight into the value that you brought and not just that you completed a role. Okay, so that's what I would think about. And then, of course, I mentioned at the bottom here, those values and transferable skills, great opportunity. You've gone through this self-reflection process to plug those in to your resume because those are going to show the value that you bring. All right, moving on to step 5. So this is the last step in the switch up your mindset. And I'm going to talk a little bit about building out your network and finding mentors. So I mentioned a little bit about mentorship, how getting that outside perspective on strengths is really valuable. But what I also want to talk about is just how important it is to build out your network and have mentors. So one thing I'll say about networking is that every conversation is a networking opportunity. So regardless of if you're at a dinner party, you're just at maybe your kid's baseball game and you've got other parents around, wherever you're at, it's an opportunity to network. And now you don't want to go into a networking conversation always thinking about, oh, what can I get from this person? I mean, that's not what you want, but you want a connection because what will happen or what can happen is you have a little conversation with that parent at the baseball game. And then maybe a few months down the line, you decide or you're thinking, I really want to go into something different in my career path. And you remember the conversation you had with that parent. Oh, I really like what she's doing in her role. I want to know more about that. And guess what? Because you networked with her, because you had that conversation, you can reach out to her and say, hey, we talked about this at the baseball game. I'd love to get a better understanding of how you got to where you are, what you like about it, and so on. And so you want to think of every conversation you have as that networking opportunity. It diversifies your network and it builds out your network. And then with mentors, you want to make sure that you have not just one mentor, but you want to make sure you have a few mentors. And the great thing about mentorship is that it doesn't have to be a formal program. A lot of us initially think of it as that. And yes, absolutely, you should be involved in a formal program if you have that available, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something informal. Well, maybe you talk once a quarter or once every other month or meet for coffee every couple months, what have you. It can be something that's not formal with a formal kind of diagram of here's what you should be talking about. So the one thing I'll say about mentors or my experience with that, and this is again just one example of many of the value that they've brought even with my recent role. So right now I'm a senior channel and inside sales manager with RF Ideas. Prior to that, I was a senior channel manager, so managing our channel partners. And now I'm also managing our inside sales team. So before getting this role, I was interested in within RF Ideas moving up to a management position. And so I spoke with actually a couple of my mentors about not just this goal, but the end goal, or I wouldn't say end goal, but the goal in a few years that I have for myself. So just sharing with them, getting their thoughts on, hey, how can I get to that point soon and then later down the road? And with that, they encouraged me to develop a career progression document. And so I worked with them on that, created that, kind of talked through it with them. And then I was able to, with their assistant, present that to my leadership team. And essentially, what we had worked on together was the role that I'm in now. And what's so great about that is, yeah, it was up to me to advocate for myself there, but I wouldn't have felt confident to do so, or I'm not just completely sure I would have if I didn't know that I had the backing of those mentors and that I had spoken with them extensively. They helped me in that process. They have had experience with developing the career progression document. And so with that, that helped me to take that. It gave me a little push, right? And we all need that sometimes. I mean, to advocate for ourselves, to have those maybe difficult conversations. And so your mentor network can really be valuable in so many ways of how you're going to move to that next step of your career. All right, let me take a quick drink here. So we've switched up our mindset, right, with those 5 steps. So we've started to really think about interpersonally, hey, what are our likes and dislikes, our values, transferable skills? What are some wins I can have on my storytelling resume? And how can I build out my network and my mentorship? So great, we're getting there. Maybe you even gotten to the role that you want to be in. Or maybe, you've had that journey and you still are just kind of working towards that next step. Perfectly fine. We're all on different journeys here. It's all different timelines for us. But how can you continually have success in the role that you're in your career path, and just continue to grow? I'm going to share with you a couple of just tidbits here of things that I find really important, and then I'll go into, and I know I'm kind of running out of time here, but some core 7 principles just for continuing success. So one thing I want to briefly talk about is vulnerability. And it may seem odd to be talking about vulnerability when we're talking about success in your career, but what I've found is that vulnerability is actually a key to success. And the reason I say that is because when I started getting vulnerable about, me feeling lost, me feeling like I had no confidence and going through that journey, among other personal things that I've shared in my speaking engagements and my book and so on, I have understood very personally that vulnerability is not a weakness. It actually leads to better career decisions because I know myself when I'm vulnerable. I know who I really am. And it leads to better career decisions. It leads to better collaboration, more trust with customers, colleagues, partners. It leads to better leadership ability because it's it shows that I'm self-aware. It shows that I can be really truly myself, and it also opens the door for other people to feel they can trust me because a lot of us have shared experiences, right? But because I've been vulnerable about it and shared those experiences, people can now feel like they can have that conversation with me because they know I've been there. And so it also has helped me to have more alignment with my career and myself. I'm not siphoning myself out into work Emily, home Emily. It helps me to really lead with those values that I have. So I'm not going to dive deeper into that today. I would have, but I'm just kind of running low on time here. But you want to stay self-aware, you want to share your story, and you want to make sure that your values stay central. And that's how you stay vulnerable, or you show vulnerability, and that leads to success at work. Briefly, I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome. This is always a topic that comes up that a lot of us have familiarity with, right? Honestly, probably most of us have experienced this. And even though I am on a self-confidence building journey, that does not mean that I don't experience this. I have experienced it. I still do experience it at times. But what's important is how you overcome. And some simple ways to overcome is you acknowledge that you're having that. You want to reframe your thoughts. So, one of the things that I did when I first got into the tech industry is that the first 2 weeks, I told the person who was training me, I said, "Oh, I don't know if I'm smart enough for this role." And now I'm like, oh my gosh, why would I say that? I bet it's because I felt like I had so much I had to know and learn in so little time. A lot of people had like engineering backgrounds and really technical backgrounds, and I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing here? But if I were to reframe that thought and think about, okay, my best friend comes to me and says, oh, I'm not smart enough for this job. I shouldn't be here. Would I say to her, oh yeah, God, you're definitely you shouldn't be here. You're not smart enough at all. No, I would not say that, so I shouldn't say that to myself. So you want to reframe your thoughts there. You want to seek support. That's where those mentors and that network really come in handy. So you want to seek guidance from them. Number four is you want to stay in a growth mindset. So think about the fact that we're always learning, right? No matter what level you're at, your VP of your company, your president of your company, CEO, they don't know everything because we're always learning. They're learning too. And so, yeah, there's something to be said about experience, but we're all continuous learners. And really, we all need to be because that's valuable for us. And then the last thing is learn from your failures and move on. So, okay, you failed. We're all going to do that at some time. That most successful person that you know has failed over and over again. They've just gotten back up afterwards. And so if they've been able to move on, so can you. So just remember that when you have those moments of imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So my core seven, just a couple of minutes here, and then we'll get into some Q&A. Just core kind of tips and tricks, tidbits for continuing success in your career. The biggest thing I'll say is communicate. And this honestly goes along with the allies and mentors as well. When you get into a role, and even if you've been in an organization or a role for a while, communicate and introduce yourself to as many people as possible. Even if you don't think that your role is really going to interact with their role, that doesn't matter. You should reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Emily Jackson. I just got into this role. Let me know if I can help answer any questions, what have you. So that if you do have a question down the line, guess what? You have an ally. You have someone that might be in your corner because you actually took the time to introduce yourself. And so that is important too continuing success and then also seeking allies and mentors in your roles, in your communities is always important because you're building that network. We talked a lot about networking and building out your network and of course your mentors within that. Creating your own 90-day goals, it seems like something so simple and something you've probably heard before, but when you get into a new role, you typically have your corporate 90-day goals, right? And of course, you should work towards those. You should try to accomplish those, but also you want your own interpersonal 90-day goals. So what are you trying to accomplish? What is going to be a win, a valuable moment for you personally? You want to create those and continue to create those as you go along in your career so that you're always not just corporate working towards something, but interpersonally working towards something. Next couple ones I'll say is show your work and record wins. We talked about recording wins, so I won't repeat that, but show your work. Something that I found really valuable for myself throughout my career, but really it started in the tech industry, is from a mentor. I was guided to do just a weekly update, little bullet points of, hey, here's what I worked on, what I accomplished this week. Not to say like, oh, I'm showing you every single thing I did, but to show like the wins for the week essentially and my focus areas so that my vendors that I worked with or my management team, they knew where I was heading, what I was working towards, and then they could also help me pivot if need be. And you know what was even better is that weekly update was then used for, hey, I think Emily's ready for this next step, and here's why. Because here's all these things that she's been doing on a weekly basis, quarterly, and so on. So that can help you as well in your career growth. Keep asking questions, keep that learning mindset. We kind of talked about that. You want to always be willing to learn new things, and you should want to. I think most of us do, but keep asking those questions. Even if you've been in a role for several years and you feel like, oh, I should know the answer to that question. It's okay if you don't. Just ask the question. Again, we're always all learning, right? No matter what part of our career we're in. And then I'll say, get involved in your company and your community culture, whether it's the organizational culture, if you have like a women's ERG within your company, maybe you're a part of something like this, the AIDC, wonderful thing to be involved in because guess what? You're building your network. You're kind of getting your thought leadership out there. You're learning from other people. You're getting those connections and getting that outside perspective. And so you're only going to benefit from that, maybe not just as career growth, but also learning. So make sure that you're doing that and seeking out those types of organizations. And lastly, give yourself grace. If you fail, if you mess up, just remember, you know what? You're not always going to make the best decisions. You might even make a bad decision in a career move, but that's okay. We've all been there, right? And so you can break through from that and you can overcome that. So just remember that. Now, I always say do something that scares you every day. And this could be as simple as speaking up at a leadership meeting, or it could be something as difficult as making that leap of faith into a brand new career path. But whatever you do something that scares you every day because you know what that does is it builds your confidence because it shows you that you can do it even if you fail at it. It shows you that you can take that leap, and that's really important. If you were to go to scan this QR code, that would take you to my website, apluswomen.com. And just to give you a little insight as to some of the things I do outside of my 9 to 5, I am a corporate leadership speaker. So I do different speaking engagements, on a global stage, virtually and in person. I also talk about introvert to sales leader and how my journey and as an introvert. So I kind of dive deeper into that. I do one-on-one career transition coaching. So essentially, I would take you through these things we talked about today, really dive deep into that, even get you ready for an interview process. And then I also have the Weight of the World book, and that is a very personal book for me that can be found on Amazon amongst other online sites as well as some local bookstores. And then if you were to go to this QR code here, that's one of the upcoming speaking engagements that I have, and it's called the Goal Achievers Summit, and that's a one-day summit that's taking place in Chicago, July 31st. And I would love for you to come out for that. I will be speaking on choosing the right goal in life, in your career. And so it'll be really expanding on what I talked about today. And so that would be an amazing opportunity. And it's not just me, it's a bunch of other fantastic speakers. And then, of course, I would be remiss to mention if you do have any RFID needs, I can be reached at my email there. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So please connect on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with all of you guys. And I think it's time now. That's all I have. We can get into a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Appreciate the presentation. It was great, and hopefully everyone gained some new insights with that. I do have some questions here that I will get to here in just a second, and I guess we'll start with for women early in their careers in AIDC or related industries. What would you encourage them to focus on first? Their technical skills, networking, their personal brand, or something else?
Yeah, I would say technical skills is the last thing I would focus on. As soon as you said that, I thought, yeah, that wouldn't be my first thing. That's important. I'm not saying it's not, but that's more learnable, right? The other things are seemingly easier, but they're a little bit more difficult. So I would focus on your networking first, getting to know as many people as you can, whether that's within an organization or within, a career focus, and get to know, hey, how did they get there? What were some of the ways that they succeeded? What did they find most important? So talking to your network about that. And then I would dive into some of the technical aspects after that.
Great.
Thank you.
And then, was there any beliefs about success or career growth that you had to unlearn in order to move forward?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yes. I always assumed, and now I think this really plays heavily into it sometimes amazes me how I ended up into like a sales role because I'm that quiet introvert. But one of the things, the reason it makes me think of this is because I believed for the longest time that you kind of had to be the most outgoing, loudest person in the room in order to find career success. That's kind of what I felt like I was seeing around me, whether it was in sales or something else. Obviously I wasn't in sales for most of my career, but just even in the fitness industry, those loudest, most outgoing personalities, the personalities that were just like, oh, people were drawn to them. I thought, ooh, do I have to become that? Because that's not like my natural self. And I'm telling you right now, you don't have to become that. You just need to be who you truly are and know what your strengths are. And it's okay if they differ from what that person is. There's also nothing wrong with being that outgoing, bubbly personality. But that doesn't mean that you have to be that same way. There's room for every personality type at the career success table. So,
Great. And then, what are some practical ways women can build confidence when they do not yet feel ready for that next opportunity?
yeah, I think some of the biggest things is, of course, you can go on this self-reflection journey and start evaluating, what are your strengths? What are your transferable skills, likes and dislikes, and so on. That's going to be really the first part. And then I cannot say this enough as far as getting that outside perspective with your network. That is something that I would do first and foremost is getting that perspective of your colleagues, people in your community and your network. Hey, what would you see as some of my strengths and what could I maybe work on a little bit more? And along with that, if you have an idea of where you want to go in the next 5, 8 years, however it may be, where you think you want to go, talk to people in those roles right now. And one thing I'll say too is like that sounds really intimidating to oh, I'm just going to randomly reach out to somebody that maybe I don't even know that well and say, "Hey, how did you get to where you're at?" But you know what? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the thing is people like to help other people, and especially women like to help other women. And so if you just ask, I mean, the worst thing they can do is just ignore you, right? Who cares? Nothing lost on your end. So just ask the question, hey, how did you get to where you're at? And you'll get a multitude of great insight from that.
Great. And a couple more questions that we have. And if you still have a question, I know Emily had shared her email. We will share contact information after the call as well if there's additional questions that people have that like to have Emily address. But this
Mhm.
one is someone that's from a company that's heavily invested in ERGs and now at another company that does not value them or DEI in general. How can they
Mhm.
be a catalyst or influencer to create that community?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. We do have a women's ERG at my company, and it's definitely something that is highly valued within the company, and so I appreciate that. But I do appreciate that not every organization has that capability or that mindset. But I think what you can do is one, you can expand outside of just your organization. So think about, I kind of talked about joining other communities. So even something like this community that is a great way. So maybe it's not your organization, but it's within the purview of what you do within your career path. But then within the organization, if you don't have the capability of doing a women's ERG or any type of ERG, you can still have that collaboration and that networking internally with each other. So you can still be reaching out to other women or other individuals on your team that you think, hey, they can be an ally for me, they can be a support system, they can be part of my network, and you can just build that informally. So, I mean, just think about the fact that your network that you have right now, it's nothing formal, right? So that network that you have within your company, if it's women focused or what have you, can be informal as well, but still just as supportive.
Great. And so this next question actually is dealing with, your network as well, and it's building off your communication slide. So what would you suggest for keeping in touch with your network? Scheduling calls every quarter with some key contacts or having one-on-ones with key internal team members? Just looking to build out a more personalized communications with this person's network.
Yeah, I think what you want to think about is what your goals are with your network. With your network, are you trying to actively gauge, hey, what are my next steps in my career? Or do you already have in mind, hey, this is where I want to go. I just need to know how to get there. And these are the great people to talk to in order to find that out. So you need to do some self-assessment there and find out what am I looking to actually do and talk about and gain from these opportunities to network. And then that's going to tell you how often you should, because you could also be thinking about, hey, what's my timeline for this? Am I talking about, oh, in the next 8 years or so, I'd like to be this. And so I want to start gradually working towards that. And so that, if you're thinking that long term, you don't need to meet as often. It's more of a long range type of stretch goal. But if you're thinking in the next 2 years, I want to be here, and this is what I need to know how I can start working towards that. Then that tells you, okay, it's a little tighter time frame, so you might need to have a little more interaction with those individuals. And just be cognizant of, and I'm sure you're all thinking about this, but we're all busy, right? We've all got all kinds of things going on. And so just be cognizant of, a mentor's time, your network's time. I don't think there's a need to meet just like, well, definitely not every week by any means, but it could just be a monthly, just, hey, quick 30-minute chat and come prepared with a mentor or in your network. Let them know, hey, here's the things that I want to talk about beforehand so that they can already be thinking through their experience and their guidance on that thing because that's going to be more valuable for you when you have those conversations.
Great. Well, that wraps up our Q&A. Emily, thank you again so much for the presentation, for your insights that you brought to the table here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to get to do this today. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining.
And before we wrap up, Julie McGill, she will be highlighting a couple of upcoming Women of AIDC activities.
Yep. So one of the things that's coming up is GS1 Connect, which is in Las Vegas. It is the week of June 8th. And we are going to have a breakfast meetup. This is our second one that we're having. We had one last year at this same event. And the picture on the left is the award that we gave to Melanie at GS1 at that time. And so we wanted to let this group know that nominations are open for the Woman of Distinction Award. This will be our second recipient. And so if anyone, has someone that they've got in mind that they'd like to nominate, you can reach out to the team at AIM and share that information. Mike, do you know what email they should send that to? Is that to Bethany or you?
Info at aimglobal.org will go to everyone, so that'll be the best one to reach.
Yep. So if you are attending GS1 Connect, we will be sending out the information for the breakfast, and we encourage you to join us. And again, if there's someone that you'd like to nominate, we encourage you to do that as well.
Great. Thank you for that information, Julie. And then as we close, I want to encourage everyone to stay connected with AIM's Women of AIDC community. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply reach out to AIM directly to make sure you are included in future discussion meetings and community activities. These conversations are what help produce the kind of meaningful content and connections you experienced here today. Thank you again to Emily Jackson for joining us, and thank you to all of you for attending and participating. We appreciate your support of the Women of AIDC community and look forward to seeing you at future events. Have a great day, everyone.